Hey everyone, Tuto back from their Spiral gameplay video, and this time this is a further continuation of the Duelist Cup, though this isn't going to be live commentary or anything. I just got to DL level 20 today for the first half, or the first two-thirds, I guess, of the Duelist Cup, and this is the deck I did it with. It's an Eradicator Epidemic Virus list, and this is one of those things that Spiral could have always done. Eradicate Epidemic Virus is obnoxiously powerful when you resolve it. You completely lock your opponent, you destroy all your opponent's spells or traps, and it's usually spells, but, you know, Labyrinth's going around too, and so it's good against those decks as well. And once you resolve this, you basically just win. And because you're Spiral and you know what your deck is playing with the drone, you can always call the right one, whether it be spell or trap. The basic idea is Runick Stun has just been flooding the format. it is everywhere. I would say upwards of 70% of my matches since the Duelist Cup started has been against Runick lists. Usually some kind of stun list with like either it's Alistair to summon Kaliga, or it's just back row stun like Gozid match and skill drains and whatnot. So having this card is a pretty solid way to kill those decks. And the reason why it's really good is, in the past we've been using like a Pointer the Red Lotus, Anti-Spell Fragrance, maybe like Buster Lock, stuff like that to lock your opponent out of playing the game, or maybe Monster Floodgates like Protoss, which are not very strong against Runick. Runick has, as you might expect, tons of main deck removal spells, because they're entirely a quick play spell archetype. And they can destroy your little floodgate that you set up, and they can out your Tri-Gate Wizard if you back it up with a Tri-Gate Wizard because they have a monster negate. It's just a really questionable situation. Now, generally speaking, a resolved sleeper with Last Resort and a resort on it is good enough to beat those decks if you go first regardless. Going second, getting to sleeper is usually how I beat them anyhow. But it's not worth risking it by playing a subpar strategy because they do have outs for the cards you're playing. A removal spell does not out-eradicate your Epidemic Virus. You just pop it on their draw phase, destroy all their spells, and then they can't beat your sleeper at that point, and they don't have a fountain anymore, so they just lose. And if they can't beat sleeper plus Eradicator, you're good to go. And this generally does just beat other decks. It's basically as good as Anti-Spell Fragrance, if not a little better. The only downside is you do have to set up an extra monster to tribute, so that's one, going to cost investment. Obviously, you need material to make a 2500 attack Dark monster, because there's no monster natively in the deck that's 2500 attack in Dark. And two, you have to sacrifice a spot on your board. And in this case, I'm using the Codebreaker package to get me a 2800 Dark monster in the form of Virus Berserker without losing me material. Downside is, of course, I do have to run a extra brick in the form of Codebreaker Zero Day, but, you know, the Codebreakers also help you get to Tri-Gate anyhow to insulate the combo from other stuff, so it's not really that big a deal. And, you know, two bricks, one Codebreaker and one Epidemic Virus is not that big a deal. Other than that, it's a pretty standard Spiral, Danger, Small World list. We're still waiting for Illusion of Chaos to come out, and I'll show you all the changes to the deck that happens when that comes out. But until then, this is kind of what I've been doing, and it's been very successful for me. I've yet to lose a game where I resolve Eradicator Epidemic Virus. It's just that good. So let's go ahead and get to some games. Alright, so here we are with the first game, and this is obviously a very good hand. It's got Spiral Resort to go get Quick Fix, Small World to go get Magician's Souls by getting rid of this useless Mothman, and a Call by the Grave as backup against hand traps. So let's just go ahead and get it going. This is going to be a very good hand on top of that because I do have an extra spell rotation thanks to Small World, so I can just go ahead and activate Selene early without worrying about it, and I also open up with a Resort, which would do the same thing. So I could, that's going to be relevant to the way you construct your board, but it doesn't stop you from doing the combo one way or the other. So go ahead and Big Red Master Plan, add Rescue Mission, and, you know, draw 2 cards off Souls, why wouldn't you? My opponent will drop an Effect Veiler. So, at this point my opponent has not ashed me, they have not Max-Seed me, they have not Gammoned me. So I can assume that this is going to be my opponent's only hand trap. I am going to Call by the Grave this, even though typically I don't try to protect my Souls draw, because once the combo's going you don't need it. But I do want cards in hand later, potentially, for Quick Fix to play through maybe one more Disruption. And the only card that I can Call by the Grave that seems relevant at this point is Effect Veiler. If my opponent's got a Nibiru, then you can't Call by the Grave that. And so if I negate this Effect Veiler, if my opponent has 2 Effect Veilers in their hand, then they can't Effect Veiler my Curious later. And the only other card to worry about would be an Imperm, and I can't Call by the Grave Imperm at all. So I couldn't think of a better way to use this Call by the Grave, so I go ahead and use it here. Get my 2 draws. They're not particularly good. It's just Zero Day and Tsuchinoko. I'm going to go ahead and chain block my Master Plan just in case my opponent was saving Ash. And I discard the Tsuchinoko. This was actually a mistake because it's going to prevent me from getting more Quick Fixes into play. But it ends up being the same amount of material regardless. But I could have just discarded the Zero Day because he works just as well in Graveyard as in hand. So a small execution error on my part, I suppose, but it's not really that big a deal. So we're going to go ahead and Rescue Mission back Master Plan, the typical, you know, this is just the Spiral loops. Master Plan add. And actually, because I have all the spells in Graveyard, I can go ahead and make Selene. Now, This is a fairly important distinction. If you do not have all these spells in hand, you haven't gone through the multiple spells like I have with Small World and Big Red and Call by the Grave, and you can't profitably make Selene, you do have to do the little quick fix scenario where you intentionally add a Big Red and discard a Big Red off quick fix and then make Selene later. And it is important to make Selene because you do need the 3 downward pointing arrows for code breakers. So it is fairly relevant that you get that online. And the other important thing is making Selene early means I can put my Helix in this zone to the bottom left instead of this zone below the barricaded Warg Blocker, and that is important because it lets me summon a bunch of Link monsters over here while keeping my spaces underneath Selene free for the code breakers. So it is very relevant to get the Selene set up at some point. You could still just do everything without that, but it's a little less material efficient. So summoning Helix over here, discard Assault, summon Quick Fix, get Drone, Assault in Drone, stack their deck, and because I'm using EEV in this particular combo, I'm going to put a spell on top of my opponent's deck. In this case, I think it was a Foolish Burial. Yep, Foolish Burial. And I'll get to summon my Quick Fix. Now, because I summoned the Tsuchinoko off my Barricade Warg Blocker, I'm kind of in a weird situation where I can't, turn Quick Fix into a Link Rebo, discard my whatever card, and summon the Quick Fix, and then overlay both Quick Fixes for a double hand, and then get to use their graveyard effects again. It's not really a -1 material because the Tsuchinoko is that material, and I do get to add a card back to hand with Barricade Warg Blocker at the end of the turn. So I guess it's technically +1 in the long run, but it's not an ideal way to play the game or to play your material in a non-Tsuchinoko based hand, I guess. Like, you wouldn't, if you discarded a Nessie here, it wouldn't be good. So go ahead and Dull Hand. Turn all of those 3 into Curious. I can summon Curious over here, keeping open these zones for my code breakers. Send ERADICATE Epidemic Virus, and nothing else of note off Curious. Go ahead and discard my Rescue Mission with Quick Fix. Add a Big Red. Rescue Mission back. Master Plan to go get my last Rescue Mission. And another good card to discard off Nightmare Unicorn. Or not Unicorn, Nightmare Griffin, which I can discard and then draw a card. And set ERADICATE Epidemic Virus. And I draw a Small World. Cute. So go ahead and go into the Virus Swordsman. Summon the Codebreaker from my hand. This is why discarding him would have been good, because it doesn't do anything in my hand. So I can summon my Berserker over here, which is very interesting, because what's important here is your Codebreaker Virus Berserker is not taking up zones that the Tri-Gate Code-Link setup needs to be in, which is why I intentionally summoned it over here with Double Helix. If my Double Helix happened to be in this zone, beneath the right-hand extra monster zone, what I would do is I would still do the Codebreaker line, but I'd just have to summon my Selene over here, and then eventually make the Codebreaker Virus Swordsman in these zones, to like leave it empty. Or I would summon them over here and then make Appaloosa on this side. So I'd summon Selene in this zone, where my mouse is, do the Codebreaker line, leave this Virus Berserker here, and then link off the Selene and whatever into an Appaloosa on this side and make my Tri-Gate board here. So the link zones are very particular in this combo, so don't get yourself caught out having to mess up your Tri-Gate setup because you summoned your Codebreaker Virus Berserker below your Appaloosa, because you need this card left on the field at the end for Eradicator Epidemic Virus. So, okay, so that's, I know a lot of description, but at this point you just construct your Tri-Gate board. So you go ahead and summon. And a funny thing is, normally when I'm doing these Tri-Gate setups with Nightmare Griffin setting a trap, I use the Nightmare Griffin as 1 as a Floodgate, and 2 as a co-link for the Tri-Gate Wizard. But because I am leaving this Virus Berserker on the board and tributing it with Eradicator Epidemic Virus, if I left Nightmare Griffin on the board, I would not be able to use my Sleeper's effect, because no matter where you summon it, like you could summon like Griffin here, Berserker here, and then have the Berserker pointing to your Sleeper, but the second you tribute your Berserker, you won't have an arrow pointing to Sleeper anymore, and it will be negated by your own Griffin, and that's bad. So you actually don't want Griffin on your end board. There is technically a way in particular combos to set up your like Virus Berserker over here. It's just very odd, and you can't consistently do it, so it's not worth like trying to do. So you could technically leave Nightmare Griffin on the board and have Sleeper online in very particular versions of the combo, but it's just not consistent. It's not worth doing. So otherwise, we summon Appaloosa, summon Nightmare Phoenix on the left-hand side, and summon Helix, summon your Sleeper, and that is the final board. EEV, Tri-Gate, Appaloosa, and Sleeper. And again, I know, like I said, I've been negative on Tri-Gate in the past, but when you have a very, very powerful Floodgate or Trap card backing it up, it's not that big a deal to put so much investment into Tri-Gate Wizard, especially in Codebreaker setups where the link material isn't so bad. So the Borg Blocker does add the Resort to my hand, giving me that extra card I talked about earlier, so I'm doing pretty good. And now we just this is what I meant. If this Nightmare Phoenix was a Nightmare Griffin, and I sacrificed this Codebreaker Virus Berserker, my Sleeper would no longer be active. So I go ahead and call Spell, and I knowingly put a Fool's Barrel on top of my opponent's deck, so I know that's one card that I'm going to have. And stuff like this is why I'm happy to run an Epidemic Virus over maybe, say, Kali Yuga, because a lot of people are playing back row hate, including Cosmic Cyclone, Twin Twisters, and the Runick Spell Trap Destruction cards, and that would stop Kali Yuga, so I've kind of gotten off of that deck, even though I think it would otherwise be very good in this format against Runick. So they're going to pop my Resort because it's the only legal target besides Epidemic Virus, which doesn't do anything. Pop 2 spell cards for my opponent, and they just have a couple of Despia, a Despian Tragedy, or Albaz, which does nothing in the face of Trigate and Appaloosa, and that is an easy game. So there you go, Eradicate Epidemic Virus, basically being as strong as anti-spell fragrance, if not a little bit stronger, because if my opponent had a Cosmic Cyclone there, they would just hit the anti-spell fragrance and go about their turn. Not that good. Epidemic Virus does not care. It's a lingering effect. Well, not a lingering effect, but a destruction effect that completely outs all their spell cards preemptively. Alright, so let's get on to game 2. Alright, so here are the second game, and as you can see, I do have a Forbidden Droplets in the deck. This is one of the earlier games I had played when I swapped over to EEV, where I still wanted Droplets, but once I started playing nothing but Runick, I took this out because it was very bad against them. So this is a okay hand. It's got Quick Fix, and it's got Rescue, and it's got Master Plan, so assuming I get a decent discard or the danger doesn't snipe, you can kind of get there. So I'm going to lead off on Quick Fix just to bait any interactions, and I didn't see anything, so I can just kind of safely set this Big Red and go ahead and activate Mothman. That will discard Droplets, which is fine, and I get another danger, which is great. That'll discard Rescue, and at this point I can just go ahead and discard the Master Plan and summon her off Big Red. So this all pretty much works out, and this is basically as good as Soul's Quick Fix. I summoned Quick Fix, I got Souls, and I got Master Plan and a monster to link her off with to trigger her effect, so we're pretty much in the same spot. The difference is I cannot go into Selene because I've only got 2 spells in rotation, so I can't turn Borg Blocker and Master Plan into Selene, which is technically not efficient, I guess. The best way to do this would be to do that, to make Selene here, but as it stands, I'm going to have to go to Helix early. And this is kind of what I meant earlier, where Helix is now in this column below the EMZ as opposed to off to the side, so you can't use him to set up the code breakers as easily. But I'll show you how to kind of maneuver around that. So we can go ahead and discard Assault, add Dread, you know, typical Spiral stuff, stack the opponent's deck. It's at this point I know they're on Runick Invocation, and I think they're on Reasonings too, so I know they're on probably Cyberstein as well. Just generic BS floodgates out of the extra deck from Kaliga and Last Warrior and Nature Exterior and whatnot. I'm not complaining, I run floodgates aplenty, but you know, that's what they're on. So yeah, I summoned the Quick Fix off Helix, I've already got the Master Plan rotation, and now I can summon Selene. But I'm not going to immediately activate her. I need to actually get into my Curious first because I need to clear up some of these zones without getting rid of the monsters I need to make Dark Monsters. If I had just gone straight into Codebreakers, I wouldn't have the zones to play with to make Curious correctly. So I have to do all this first while Selene just kind of sits here and waits around before she summons Master Plan. So as you can see, I've got these 2 Dark Monsters set up. I did get to get both Quick Fixes under the Dull Hands. And now I've got 3 Dark Monsters for Curious, and I can go ahead and send the Epidemic Virus. So, Curious send. And at this point, I can just go straight into, I didn't mill anything randomly of note, and I can go straight into Nightmare Griffin here, discarding this rescue mission and setting EEV. I do draw this danger, which I am going to make use of, because why wouldn't I? That said, it will not matter for this particular combo. If I didn't draw the danger randomly there, I still have Super Agent in hand, who I'm not going to use, who could make who could be the substitute material in that situation. So I'm just going to turn these into Appaloosa, and use this Quick Fix that I summoned off Helix, while Helix was still in the field, into Swordsman. Swordsman into Zero Day, turn both those into Berserker, and I'm going to do it over here next to the Griffin. So you see I kind of put Berserker on his own little island off to the side away from the Trigate setup. And if I needed to, if I didn't have enough material, I could just rescue mission Helix here, and I would still have the Nightmare Griffin to make the left link on my Trigate Wizard. That said, that is not the case. I can just go ahead and use Quick Fix, discard Master Plan, and keep my Sleeper active by making Nightmare Phoenix. Sleeper is going to be a lot more valuable in general than the Nightmare Griffin Floodgate. And like I said, I do have this extra Super Agent that I did not need. Now, if I didn't open by discarding that Droplets to get me my 3rd spell for Selene, I could have done the Quick Fix stuff and just discarded Big Red first. It wouldn't have been a big deal, I just wouldn't have this Big Red in my hand. Alright, so go ahead and shuffle back the drone. I got Agent and Big Red in hand, which is great for a follow-up, and we're just going to, in draw phase, Epidemic Virus them. And as you can see, my opponent is on Runick, and they're going to chain this Freezing Curses to negate a monster. Well, they're going to negate my Appaloosa, Considering I know they're on Runick, I don't care. Like, there's so few cards that have a monster effect that I care to negate with Appaloosa, and it would just be Alistair. And if they summon an Alistair, I've got Sleeper and Trigate Wizard to interact with it. So I'm just going to go ahead and let this pass instead of wasting my Trigate on it. And then, they, they banish some cards, doesn't matter. And I see their hand is all spell cards. And they're dead, obviously. And this is why I am playing Eradicator Epidemic Virus in this format. Just tons of Runick, and they cannot beat that card. Alright, let's get to a little conclusion. Alright, so here's the deck one last time, the one that I kind of settled on eventually because Forbidden Droplets wasn't doing anything in Runick format. That said, if you don't find yourself running into Runick very often, you find yourself running into, other combo decks and such, throw Droplet back in, it's pretty good. Another good card to consider in an EEV deck is Bigfoot. The idea is that if you can discard a Jackalope or just get it to snipe, you can summon Bigfoot as a high attack dark monster for EEV without having to go into the Codebreaker setup. And by doing that, you could keep your Griffin on the field and summon Sleeper next to Griffin as long as you put your Bigfoot in the right zone. So that's like a really decent consideration. And Bigfoot's not that bad in general. It's just a good going second card, no matter what you're doing. Like I said, you could run Droplets, and there's other good going second cards. At one point, when I was 100% just playing against nothing but Runick and Labyrinth, I was on Twin Twisters, which is really good in Spiral. You can discard like Dangers, you can discard Missions, you can discard Quick Fix or Master Plan if you want to get them in the graveyard to pop multiple cards. And it's really good against Labyrinth as well. So that's like another really good card depending on this particular meta. That said, this isn't just good against Runick. While EEV I think is almost certainly the best strategy in a Runick heavy metagame, this is good no matter what you're against. If you know your opponent is playing a deck that is anything besides just Monster Mash, then EEV is going to take something away from them. You can stack their deck with a spell card and chain this. I mean, Sword Soul's obviously got their Blackout and their Emergence and their Pot of Desires, all that stuff that they want in hand for EEV, and you get to know your opponent's hand so you can time your Sleeper and your Appaloosa and your Trigate more effectively. I mean, basically any deck except, like, Sekka's Light Adamantivator, which is a garbage deck that can't beat like a 2-mana Appaloosa anyhow, is going to lose to Eradicator Epidemic Virus. The only downside is it is very high material investment. Having to, make this big old Link 3 and sacrifice it to get it going is a lot more expensive on the board cost than something like Anti-Spell Fragrance, but it beats Quick Play Spell Trap Removal, so it's pretty good. Anyhow, guys, that's it. I hope you enjoyed the video and you like I guess the metagame call of the Eradicator Epidemic Virus variant. And if you did, throw a like, comment, subscribe, whatever, and I'll see you next time, gang. Have a good one. Bye.